Ever since the dawn of slasher flicks and horror movies, parents all over the world have rushed to protect their children from the brutality of violent media, worried that the senseless violence will turn their children into the next Freddy Krueger. Today, Nathan and I will be discussing whether this paranoia is warranted by exploring the potential behavioural effects of prevalent violence in the media. There have been a number of experiments showing the correlation between exposure to aggressive behaviour and committing violent behaviour, such as Bandura's aggression model and social learning theory, which explores the techniques of which people use to learn, specifically how we copy how other people behave. Other studies, such as one undertaken by the Indiana University School of Medicine, looks at the effects of violent video games on the emotional and decision-making areas of the brain. We'll be also looking at general trends in statistics and discussing whether there is any link between the rise of extensive violent media and an increase in violent crimes.
There have been many experiments and detailed studies that have been conducted in recent years to show the romanticized link between media violence and the negative effects it can have on brain function and behavior. However, a very early experiment completed in 1961 by Alfred Bandura was testing if social behaviors, for example aggression, could be learned through observation and imitation. There were 36 boys and 36 girls involved in Alfred Bandura's aggression model experiment. These children were aged 3 to 5. Bandura placed the children in the room individually with an adult which was accompanied by a number of different toys, such as cars and a toy Bandura called the Bobo doll. Within a few minutes, the adult in the room would unexpectedly start to attack the Bobo doll and the toys, and this involved kicking, screaming, yelling, throwing it around in a very vicious manner. This continued on for a period of 10 minutes. Bandura had one group exposed to aggressive behavior for 10 minutes from one adult, while another group was exposed to a non-aggressive model for 10 minutes. The experiment showed that there was more partial and non-imitative aggression among those children who had observed aggressive behavior. Although the difference for non-imitative aggression was small, we found that the dolls were used as a weapon for assault. The girls in the aggressive model showed more physical aggressive responses if the model was male, but more verbal aggressive responses if the model was female. However, there was an exception to this pattern, which was the observation of how they punched a Bobo doll, and in this case, the effects on the gender were reversed. The boys were more likely to imitate same-sex models than girls, and the evidence for girls imitating same-sex models is not strong. Through this, we are able to apply Bandura's social learning theory of observational learning to today's social media and video game violence. It can be said that long-term exposure to violent video games using Bandura's experiments as evidence can lead to increased aggression in children today. Now with Bandura's social learning theory, he agrees with the behaviorist learning theories of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. However, he has two main ideas. One being the mediating process occurring between stimuli and responses, and that behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. Bandura notes that children observe the people around them behaving in various ways. This is illustrated in the Bobo doll experiment previously discussed. In society, children are surrounded by many influential models, such as parents within the family, characters on children's TVs, friends within their peer groups, and teachers at school. These models provide examples of behavior to observe and imitate, for example, masculinity, femininity, pro and antisocial behavior, as well as violence. Children pay attention to some of the people and encode their behavior. At a later time, they may imitate or copy this behavior they have observed. They may do this regardless of whether the behavior is gender appropriate or not, but there are a number of processes that make it more likely that a child will reproduce the behavior that society deems appropriate for its sex. First, the child is more likely to attend and imitate those people who it perceives itself as similar. Second, the people around the child will respond to the behavior it imitates with either reinforcement or punishment. If a child imitates a model's behavior and the consequences are rewarding, the child is more likely to perform the behavior again. Third, the child will also take into account of what happens to the other people when deciding whether or not to copy someone's actions. A person learns by observing the consequences of another person's behavior.
The first major study into the effects of playing violent video games on the functioning of the brain produced astounding results. The study by Indiana University School of Medicine used 22 randomly selected male participants to undergo fMRI scans before and after completing at least 10 hours of violent video games over the course of a week. The studies definitively showed that there is visible alterations in the fMRI scans, with a larger activation of brain activity in the amygdala and a significant decrease in the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is located in the frontal area of the brain and regulates thought for decision-making, reactions, focused thought, attention, and self-control, while the amygdala is the so-called emotional center of the brain that is responsible for many emotional functions such as depression, anger, impulse, and aggression. Although these results cannot specifically indicate what the implications of the brain scans are, it does show that playing violent video games is having a significant effect on the functioning of our brains and is affecting the way we think and behave. Contrastly, a study published by Christopher Ferguson in the Journal of Communications analysed statistics with relation to movie violence and homicide rates from 1920 to 2005. The relationship of the statistics suggested that in the first few years there is small to moderate correlation between an increase in violent media and homicide rates. However, this does not take into account the social and political issues of the time, such as world wars and the Great Depression. This shaky correlation is shown to be reversed in the latter half of the 20th century. As violence increases, homicide rates fall. The two are shown to be inversely related. The second set of statistics analysed, which examined the rise of violent video games in relation to youth violence rates in the last 2 decades, suggested that not only is violent media not associated with the rise in youth violence, but video game consumption is associated with the decline in youth violence rates. Christopher Ferguson's findings suggest that societal consumption of media violence is not predictive of increased societal violence rates.
Overall, it can be seen through Alpha Bandura's social learning theory and Bobo doll experiment that it is possible for children to become more violent through long-term exposure to video games and violent media. However, current statistics show the opposite of what Bandura's experiment showed.